Okay, thanks everybody for coming and attending this webinar. I'm Antonio. I'm here at IDX. I was the partner channel manager, so I'm quite familiar with all the partner stuffs. I do mostly integrations now, and I think this is probably why I'm doing this webinar. It's a good fit. We're talking about integrations with IDX, our pages, and your designs and your code. So if you haven't heard about the partner custom templates, they are really new. They are evolving. We're definitely taking feedback on them. The whole idea really is to give more control to our developer partners over the pages, when load times, code you can inject, and overall the customer experience that happens on these IDX pages. Let's take a look at them. So yeah, these templates is IDX's way of opening up our templating system to partners. You can add, modify, and remove HTML, add or modify or remove the CSS and then the JavaScript. But can't they already do that, right? Like, partners can add CSS, they can't necessarily remove it. They can always add HTML via our subheaders or wrappers, same thing with JavaScript. But this has always been an injection and never an editing feature. Subheaders and wrappers are inherited by the existing template, not editing the existing templates. So you can already add and modify things, but not necessarily remove. You already have part of that functionality, but even the functionality you have now of adding, say, JavaScript to a subheader, this might be a better way to accomplish your goals. And I'll explain that here in a little further in a second with some examples. So with a template, a custom template, you're taking our existing templates, in this case mobile first, and editing it yourself. We will then use your template on your clients' pages. This is for your clients as a partner only. This does not go out to all clients. Here shown is the interface, and I'll dive into that a little bit more. We have HTML in our Twig templating system on the left there, CSS on the right, with a toggle to go to the JavaScript that's loaded. Because you're loading before we're sending it out, the resources are going to, scripts and everything will load faster and interact with a pre-rendered page as opposed to DOM manipulation, for example. This is kind of the model of and views of our system here. We have the database there on the far left, feeding the data to the Twig templating system, and then finally rendering all that, running all the Twig macros and variables, and I'll show you those later, to the front end, which makes that details page. And if you add your JavaScript, your CSS, any additional HTML in the wrapper and everything, all of that's going to run there on the front end, where the JavaScript says JS runs here on the front end. Twig allows us to move one step back closer to that database. Not all the way back, but a little bit closer. So we're getting further away from rendered stuff in our way and trying to work around the template. Instead of doing things like z-index on your CSS to move things around, we would move it around in Twig directly, for example. So that's kind of the reason we wanted to make these for our partners, is customization's getting more and more intense. I see a lot of great customized pages out there for IDX, and a lot of it is jQuery, JavaScript layers on top of our templating system. So why not open the templating system itself? This all runs on PHP, can't just use PHP. So not really. There might be some PHP you can run, but we do have to kind of blacklist some functions, obvious ones like eval. This is for our own protection, so the templating system doesn't run into a loop and break, or some code doesn't expose some security feature or expose something secure. The macros in Twig will allow you to interact with the database. You won't get direct database access. Probably not in MLS compliance, so I don't think we're going to be doing that. At the end of the day, you can run things that are closer to PHP like Twig and apply PHP-like logic, but not necessarily all of PHP itself is opened up. We do have requirements. You do have to be an IDX broker partner. You have to have a demo account, which all partner accounts come with a demo account. And HTTPS needs to be enabled on the demo account. HTTPS has to be enabled because we have a preview window in the editor that is running inside of middleware, which is HTTPS. And as everybody knows, you can't run two different security levels in an iframe. So those are the basic requirements for it. I would suggest some knowledge of probably some PHP would be nice. You don't necessarily need to know any code, honestly. If you read through the Twig templates, and once you understand the system of the variables and macros, you can start moving things around pretty easily with actually no code knowledge, in all honesty. But understanding how things load and the separations of concerns of what something should be doing and not in a template is going to help a lot. And especially since our templates have a lot of conditions in them, having some background in some sort of logical programming would definitely help. So let's just jump right into an example. 404 pages are very common in this industry. Properties come and go, resulting in a 404 page. This is the natural way of the internet. If something was there and now it's not, it's a 404. Our industry has probably more of them than any, just because of, like I said, of the properties. These pages are built based on data that is coming and going. So this is something all of our clients have to deal with a lot, and I really feel like that's part of the experience that can be controlled already, but we'll take a look at how we can control it even further. So right now you can edit the contents of a 404 page. You can go to, say, subheader and add a little HTML and jQuery like we see here. And this is pretty typical. I've seen this on lots of pages to bring in just some sort of fun image as opposed to the kind of more functional 404 page we have where it says, sorry, please search again or something. And here's a contact form with a, that call to action. This way is fine and it works just fine. There's nothing wrong with it. Sometimes on a page load, especially when you're rewriting or adding things to the DOM, you'll get that little flicker where it doesn't show up right away and it's just not as fluid as it could be. So it is easy and it uses stuff that's already there, right? jQuery is already loaded on all our IDX pages. It's really not that much code. You're just doing one conditional check here in the code and then writing to a div that you've added to the subheader. So the subheader option's very easy to add code to as well. So pretty solid solution, honestly. It does depend on jQuery. So some jQuery might be loaded also in the wrapper somewhere from a WordPress install, which loads its own version of jQuery. So getting to version conflicts is not fun. And the client actually does have access to this code. So if they were in the account and went into the subheader and poking around, which I've seen before, sometimes people just delete stuff because they think it's irrelevant. And that has happened. And our subheaders don't have a backup on each one. So client blows out the code, it's gone. So those are kind of minuses for that. In a custom template to achieve the same thing, I would use some logic here, and this is a Twig style, which I'll talk about a little bit more. I just write the HTML I want. So instead of waiting for the page to load and then making decisions based on what the page has loaded, I'll be just writing things directly if the logic dictates. The logic will run before the page loads, so I won't get that flicker of things coming in and out, DOM getting rewritten. It'll just be that way from the initial load. So it's already less code. It's really only one logical statement and write HTML to wherever this code appears in our Twig document. And that's less logic for me to worry about. The client has no access to it. There's no dependency on another library like jQuery that may be loaded twice for whatever reason. The only real minus I see is learning this new tech, but I kind of consider learning new tech a plus because I think it's fun. I think that shows the difference between the two approaches. One of them is rewriting existing text on a page, and the other is writing it as the page is written based on the information that's already there. So why is it such a different code? And that's because we use Twig. Twig is a templating engine for PHP. The syntax for the logic is a lot like PHP. And once you start using it, you start seeing the similarities. And there's a lot of great documentation for it. If you have any questions, feel free to toss them in the questions box right now. And if you want links to the docs or anything like that for Twig, you don't necessarily need to know Twig deeply in order to use it. We have written the macros mostly because we use them. Variables are easy, just like most variables. But we use Twig because it's a very quick engine optimized for PHP, which is what IDX Broker is built on. This is from the Twig page, so some of this doesn't apply, like the sandbox mode. Although you can write your own Twig fiddles. I think there's a fiddle for it, or sandbox, and a lot of it can actually be applied to IDX Broker pages, especially if you write your own macros in a sandbox. So yeah, that's what we use here. Like I said, you don't need to deeply know it, but some familiarity would be great. So IDX uses Twig for our page templates, and now you can use Twig too. And that's the whole point of opening up these partner templates to you guys. So let's talk about Twig real quick and Twig variables. The variables are double curly brace, which I believe is also called mustache. That's fun. This represents some IDX or user data, like a variable does represent some kind of data. You can declare your own in Twig. We have ones that we use as well. And like I said, uses the double braces. So pretty typical variable, just a little bit of different syntax instead of like PHP style using the $sign or JavaScript style using var or let. Instead, it's the curly braces. And the curly braces really do dominate most of the Twig syntax. So let's do another example really quickly. So logic based on status. So IDX status is a variable that is in our page templates for details because it's going to have a status. This would return something like active or sold. Again, we can do logic based on this before it ever gets to the page. So in Twig, we would say if the status equals sold, we can set the property category, and else if on down for different statuses. In this case, I'm just setting the property category. However, you can add whatever you want here. So for example, if status equals sold, perhaps it's a different call to action, and it could just write HTML to that area in your Twig document. If the status is active, great. You don't necessarily do a sold call to action. Instead, you let the page load as normal and set the property category, for example. And this would be something you, again, could do on a JavaScript layer on top of a details page, but instead of it possibly loading or not loading or flickering, everything is just going to run before the page renders. So yeah, we can make these logical choices already, but moving one step further back into the template level is a much more seamless load. And I think well worth the benefit, especially as you start building out pages for more and more conditions. This allows you to control a lot more and more of the experience. Twig also uses macros. You might be familiar with macros from other applications. Excel uses macros, and they really are just shortcuts to a bunch of code or a static resource of some kind. So you may take elements and apply some logic to them, and variables. All of those can go into a macro. Macros could also be just static HTML, honestly. They really are just a shortcut to something that you're going to do over and over again. So why not write a macro to save yourself some code time? So let's take a look at an example of the macros. Using a macro for the contact form. This is a good example, I think, because contact forms are something you can stick anywhere on most of these pages. Prompting a visitor to contact the agent is always a good idea, I think. Everybody wants that more one-on-one contact. So instead of writing the contact form over and over again, IDX Broker uses a macro, and you can too. Since this is a very common element, we have a Twig file that is just the macro, and this one line of include mobile first contact comp -1.twig will write all the HTML for this contact form. Currently on, let's say, a details page, the contact form by default is in the bottom. If I want to move that now, I can z-index it up, but that also means I have to move around other elements on the top of the page if I want to move it up the page. I can hide it and rewrite it again with JavaScript, but again, I have that same issue of now I'm injecting here to the top of the page, and other CSS, other possibly dynamic elements might change the spacing up there. So instead of doing that and having, again, client access to said JavaScript or CSS, I can do this in Twig in my custom template if I know I always want that up there. And instead of just moving it up there, this could be part of an overall design. I think the custom templates lend themselves to a partner having a vision for a design of a page and then executing it much more efficiently than trying to rearrange the existing pages. So I want my contact form up higher wherever I decide, and instead of writing a whole another form, I can just grab this Twig macro and move it up on the Twig document wherever I want, and it'll just appear. And I don't need to write any of this HTML because it's a perfectly good contact form. I don't need to rearrange it. So that's a good example of using a macro for something very common on your templates, and using what IDX Broker has already done, because we're putting out contact forms. All the variables here, like the agent name, the address, and all that stuff will be dynamically entered. So if your agent changes their name, it'll just update because this Twig file has those variables set to hit when it hits a database. So I do have actual page templates that I've used, and I wanted to show everybody as kind of examples. But before I do that, I wanted to jump into the actual interface. So my page examples start where everyone's going to, here in the partner account. I've already clicked on designs and custom templates. This is where you would go to start making your custom templates. As soon as you click on that, you'll go to this IDX Templates. These are their mobile first templates, and you can see they're bucketed into categories: search pages, all your search pages, address, listing, advanced. The map pages, of which there's only one. The results pages, again, only one. Results pages count as a couple pages, actually. It is one page, but there's different conditions, right? So the page will load things differently if there are no results or if there are many results. Details pages like that too, where if the details page that you're looking for is a 404, it will conditionally load a different set of elements. So we'll look at that. That's one of my examples here coming up. And roster page. So you have access to all of these pages right now. Clicking on any one of these will load the template. And you can see this is the editor I was talking about. Here's all the CSS on one side. Twig and HTML over here. We can see some of the elements that I had mentioned before. Here's an include for a Twig file right here. That's for the nav bar. In theory, I could put the nav bar anywhere I want, just like I could with that contact form. Copy that, delete it, move it down to the bottom of the page if that's where I so wanted it. You'll see it's all mixed in with HTML as well. Here's an input type that uses a variable. So the idea of this page will be the value of this input. There's a lot of other kinds of Twig stuff in here, importing other Twig files to be used as shortcuts. So importing search tools as tools. I can then reference this as tools from now on, and I can pull elements out of the search tools Twig file. And this is a note here, content, and some logic. Here's an end of an if statement, for example. So we've got a lot of the basic elements of most programming here in Twig, and it does take a little time to read through these. I took some time myself to really just read through and try to understand what each one of these blocks are doing. Not all this Twig is going to load because I said there's conditions. So if the status values, once this is satisfied, this will then load. Otherwise, I won't see it on the front page. So toying around with it's a really good idea to really understand how these templates are set up. Once you decided you want to edit this template, because currently You cannot. Let me push buttons, nothing types. You have to save it to your library. So your library will be all the templates that you are now customizing on top of this layer of our mobile first templates. I have a couple folders here. You can bucket them yourself for whatever your organization desires are. Same thing with tags. You can add tags on them. So if you have a lot going on, some in development, for example, some not, you can save them, give them descriptions, give them names. You can then clone them afterwards. So I have some already started. Let's go ahead and, if you want to see the template, you want to preview it anytime, this show button does work, and it will bring up the template into an iframe inside middleware. And go back by clicking hide. So let's jump into one of my templates. So your templates all go into your library. I have a couple testing ones that I have just destroyed. They are not working so well. I'm going to delete those. But I also have some demo ones. Let's take a look at my results. So it looks pretty normal for the most part. The one thing that is different here that I have done with this results page is I've added a little CSS here on the bottom here too for my map, but I've also decided to bring in my own map. So I got rid of the macro that brings in the map that usually writes to this div ID, idx-map, and I started bringing in my own leaflet using the same map system. You don't have to. Any map system would work because I actually have control of the page, so I can bring in something like Bing or Google. I have variables set for my testing. I'm testing out different map tiles, different prop pins, so different customizations like that. Let's go take a look at what that looks like on the front. This is my template. That's the one I was just showing you in Twig. You can see the map is, instead of on top or bottom, it is on the right, and on the left is the properties. That's the basics I started with, but I can already do that with CSS. This example here shows just a little bit of CSS, does give you that map on right, properties on the left, and a scrolling div, and it works just fine. I can scroll through the div, I can interact with the map. It still pulls up the property details kind of bubbles that we have, which I think is great when the map's on top or the bottom, but when I'm looking at the properties on the side, I'm not sure I want that. I'm already looking at property information here on the left, so I'm not sure I need the bubbles. Adding another interaction means I have to work with the map and figure out exactly how to manipulate an already existing map. And that's going to be probably a lot more CSS than I want to write. So here it is live in a frame inside this slides.com. So I have the map. You see I have a custom pin here. Let me move around here. Move somewhere a little more dense. So I have a couple things going on in the map already that are different. Like I said, my pins are different. I've changed the pins. I've changed the map tiles too. They're not the default IDX broker map tiles. So already that makes my map a little bit more unique on this page. Side-by-side thing is still happening. I had to use less CSS for that because I was able to write these where I felt. The other thing is the pins my pins are no longer opening a little bubble to show the information on the side because I have the information already to display on the side. So instead, let me scroll back down. There we go. I can scroll through the side here and move around to every property, and that's fine. But how does that correspond to the map? So instead, I have my pins set to find that property on the sidebar for me and go directly to it and scroll directly to it. So as I scroll through the map, it's going to move over there. Now this interaction I think is fun. I like the way it moves for me, and it's like it's trying to show me the information I'm asking for. This would be a lot harder to do without a custom template. I would have to figure out how to bind these divs on one side to the pins on the other with syntax that wasn't ever intended to do that. In rewriting the map myself, I'm able to add the div IDs as the latitude and longitude of the map pins, which I get on a click event. Then, since I have that information, I know exactly which div to scroll to. My JS can fire on click and auto scroll to the correct div because they are now bound by the IDs. So that's an example of some customization on the map template. Changing things is pretty easy. For example, let's change the prop pins. I have these set to variables for myself, so that way I could show everybody what it looks like when you change stuff around. Let's go ahead and grab that. So now my prop pins are different. Now I'm using the little house pins, which are kind of fun. This opens up a lot of customization options for whatever your client envisions of how this map and this experience should look. I can also now that we've changed that, let's change the tiles. Most maps have tile options. I think all do have some kind of tile options, but that also opens up a lot of options for your clients and yourself to design great pages. Or in my case here, we're designing some pages that aren't so great. So I changed my map tiles to a grayscale, which I think would look really cool in some websites, but considering this website is gray and white mostly, it ends up not looking so great. It kind of, especially I get to here, it kind of just looks like my pins are floating out in the air. So the partner custom templates really are an opportunity for the developers, backend developers, who are going to dive into the Twig and the HTML and the JavaScript, and a designer to work together to open up the options and see what you can come up with. I think that's really fun and cool, and it seems like it's a lot of more technical, but the design also has to be there, and I think this kind of illustrates that. So working together with your designers or the vision that your client has, who in that case I guess would be the functional designer, and being able to code that is, I think, very empowering, and I think that's the exciting thing about these. And then being able to share them either with a single client, or if you design it for all of your clients, you can share it much more easily, as opposed to making certain wrappers, adjusting them for each one, and then having to keep track of each one. The template now can just be applied as any regular template can by going to the details in middleware, or the other page in the middleware, and choosing designs and then layout. So another great example, I think, of how these things can be used is to use more of the internet itself. And what I mean by that is resources outside of the IDX broker data. So I rearranged the results page based on the IDX broker data provided, and I brought in already a resource that's kind of already there, the map from Leaflet, and different tiles, and those are just options in Leaflet, but there's more. I don't need to just limit myself to maps and things. Let's revisit kind of the 404 experience. Instead of just bringing in, like in the previous example, I was just putting in some HTML and a fun image, because images are fun. But let's do that. But let's use some other resources, Google's API, JavaScript libraries, even Giphy. And let's auto-suggest some more searching, because I want my client or my visitor who did not find the property they were looking for to continue to search for things on my site, because the user experience matters. Controlling more of the user experience is what these templates really are all about. Oops. Let's go ahead and visit that 404 page. So here I'm on the search. I'm actually going to take this out of the frame because I don't like the double scroll that the slides make me have. All right, so we're back to here. Go in. Again, I'm going to find someplace a little more dense. So here we are in the Portland area. Down here. What do we got here? This is Lake Oswego. Great. So here's the details page. This is not a 404 page. This is a regular details page in Lake Oswego. Very, very nice house on the water. And I might want to be looking for something like that. And maybe I shared this URL on social or mailed out or in some kind of campaign or something. But the property is now gone. And when the property is gone, that means the URL doesn't change. This MLS listing ID will remain the same. However, the listing will not be found in the system because it's not active. So if I put in some more numbers, now I have an invalid MLS ID. This should lead to 404 page. Oh no, I can't find the property. So I've, again, brought in an image here. There's a little cat trying to catch a mouse on an iPad and really wants it, apparently. So that's fun. Bring a little bit of levity to the page, because that's the experience I want. Yeah, you couldn't find what you were looking for, but here's something fun. And I still have my normal call to action, which is the contact form. Again, I can move this up using that macro in the Twig file. But I also want the user to keep searching for things. But how do I prompt them without saying, hey, just go try and search again? I already know one thing that they were looking for. They were looking for this address here in the URL string. So great, I'm going to use that as kind of an indicator of what to suggest. I have a pull down here that has already grabbed this address and sent it off to Google's API to geocode it. So now I will get returned back a latitude and longitude of this address. In that case, I can say, I want to search for properties near the one I was searching for, which would be near this property in Lake Oswego. Or I can use normal JavaScript and HTML5 to find properties near me. So each one of these searches that I can click on here now are based on one piece of data, either the latitude and longitude of the property you're looking for in the first place, or your latitude and longitude as the browser returns it. They're both radius searches and are easy to use over and over again. So I choose near where I was looking for, and I'm back at a Lake Oswego search in that neighborhood. Probably should change the zoom level, but you can see they're kind of in a circle here because this is a radius search. If you look at the URL string, you'll see this is a polygon, and I pass it a latitude and longitude and a radius. So that'll be the distance of my circle. I don't need anything more than that to create this search on the fly. This puts the visitor back in a place to look in that neighborhood where they probably liked that house and there are similar houses for sale, instead of prompting to a starting over, like a complete start over for a search. So now I've empowered the visitor to do more stuff, and I'm controlling that experience a little bit more than just setting them back on their way as kind of a reset. Or I can do near me. So let's do near me. Of course, this does require HTTPS because all the geolocation stuff does. You'll be prompted to allow it. And now I'm, again, in a radius, but you can see I'm in Eugene because I'm not in Portland. So based on a really quick evaluation of the experience that's happening, I can offer a somewhat related experience and get the user back on track. Let's take a quick look at my template here for this. So in order to create this, what I needed to do was bring in a couple resources and find the right place in the Twig file. The Twig file, these Twig files are full of, like I said, macros and logic. So it's kind of tough to just get one concise document that tells you where everything is and what it is, because a lot of it is conditional. So for example, all the stuff I put in there in the search and the pull down only loads if this missing property is satisfied as true. Again, that makes it a little tough to just have one document because we have if statements. If this happens, load this and these macros. If this happens, load this from these macros. So to really diagram that out is a little tough. I think getting to know the pages is probably the best way to really understand how you can build in things. That being said, here's what I did. Here's a little note to myself to start my logic. I use Axios for my Ajax calls. I could use jQuery, which is already there, but again, I'm not a big fan of conflicts. Bring in Giphy. I have my Giphy to my little cat that was there. Here's my message for the 404. Let them know that, oh no, you can find the property. And here's the HTML for my dropdown, my selector. This has an on change to fire up a function called search again. Search again will either find near me and give me the latitude and longitude from the browser, or it will hit up Google's geocode. Here it is, maps geocode, part of my key, you can't use it, and pass the address in from the path name. So here it is, the path, window, path name, split at the slashes. Let's go ahead and grab the address, which is in that ordinal, and pass it to Google, get our results, and then set the window location to those latitude and longitude results in a radius search as the IDX broker polygons allow for. And that's pretty much it. It really isn't a whole lot. It's more about knowing where in the macros to start your customizations to get them to show up correctly. As you saw on the details page before, this customization does not fire if it is not a 404. Instead, it only fires when it's 404 because of the logic in the macros. So now I've controlled a lot more of the experience. You come into a 404, you find a 404 page, especially one that's been shared or indexed and is no longer there. Instead of reset, I am now trying to guide you in the experience of home search on our website and our IDX pages. So where do you start? There's a lot of documentation that we're still opening up. Things will be available in an open source way. Our documents and source material for Twigs and whatnot will be on our GitHub, and we might have it on GitLab. I'm not sure now that GitHub's been bought, but there'll definitely be those kind of docs. I really recommend just poking around at it first, looking at the logic and coming up with an experience that you want to control, and then finding where in the Twig you're going to need to start working on. So for example, like I said, I wanted to control the results experience and the 404 experience. So these are on two different templates. First thing, I need to know which one I want to control, and then which template to go to, then find when the logic where I need to start working on. And those are the elements I would work on first, instead of trying to understand all the macros. But yeah, let's all get started on this. Feel free to join me on Slack if you're not on Slack. That URL there will auto let you into my Slack channel, which is IDX Dev, and I just hang out and talk about dev stuff when there's stuff to talk about. You can visit my GitHub for these page templates. The results one is up there right now. I will get the 404 one up there by the end of today as well. Those are my projects. They will remain open source. Feel free to use them. I'm working with Dave over at Agent Evolution about getting some templates going for those guys. I'm happy to talk templates with anybody. You can email me, antonio@idxbroker.com. And I can't wait to see what everybody creates. It's a lot of fun. I'll be honest. I'm really enjoying these templates. I'd like to thank Lee here, who built the interface and made a lot of this possible. And he's actually the one answering questions. So thanks, Lee. And I want to thank everybody for visiting. If you have any questions, just go ahead and put them in the questions box. I can hang out for a little bit and answer if you haven't already been answered. Let's see here. Is there going to be a way to set for just one client using the library? You can set for just one client manually. As far as like some sort of slicker interface, that's going to be an enhancement, and we're really open to those because there's a lot of cool things that could be done in the middleware, but we need to know how partners are using them first. Okay, so I had a question here about purchasing custom templates. That's definitely something we thought about as well, some sort of marketplace, but right now we need to get these kind of rolling before we can start a marketplace. So, I mean, that's kind of why I'm putting these out here as open source, just to get everyone in the pool before we start bringing in some really cool features. I can totally see this going lots of different ways, but I kind of don't want to run down the wish list until we get some templates going, at least for me. Yeah, this is being recorded right now. I'll make sure it's on YouTube. That was a question I just saw right now. So we record all these. They're almost always on YouTube. I'll be sure it gets up there no matter what. I'll try to make a transcript and put my slides up on GitHub as well, probably in the page templates repo you see there. So the slides will be there, and I think I can do some transcript stuff on YouTube. I can't remember. I haven't done it in a while. But definitely this resource will be there in the future online. Also, if you have questions, maybe you don't have them right now, but you might come up with some later, definitely join me on Slack there. That Heroku app auto lets you in. So if you're on Slack already, you can just join that channel, and I'll be there to answer questions and tinkering with my templates too. I'll put these links in, or not the link, I'll put the GitHub link in there. There's some other GitHub resources, and there's also a couple lessons on developers with some simple examples of using, I think, the most basic of the searches, which is listing ID. It goes through and kind of reiterates a lot what I said here of, hey, this is a macro, this is a variable, this is kind of how you interact with them, and a very simple example of listing ID search. I see, shout out to James Call. Yeah, I'm really excited about this too, James. It's pretty neat. Like I said, I'm really excited to see it in the wild. I know we talked about this a long time ago at the Developer Summit. It took a while to get it right, and especially in a safe way that doesn't break any of their templates. You know, opening up part of your system starts a lot of questions of, okay, how much do we open? How much do we not open? And I think we've struck a pretty good balance here. And like I said, you don't get direct access to the database, but you do get a ton of control. And I hope my examples have kind of illustrated that. All right, guys, looks like there's no more questions. Like I said, check YouTube, join my Slack channel, email me if you want, Antonio@idxbroker.com.